Since 1998, more than 1,000 children in the United States have died in hot cars, and most of these tragedies fall into just a few repeating patterns. The circumstances in these cases vary significantly. Some involve memory failures and routine disruptions, while others involve caregivers knowingly leaving children in vehicles, often underestimating how quickly these conditions can become dangerous. And in many of these cases, the people involved never believed anything like this could happen to them. Until it did. But despite how different these stories may seem on the surface, most hot car deaths fall into 3 distinct patterns, including one that many people don't realize can happen at all. Each year, dozens of children die in hot cars, and almost all of those deaths are preventable. As of filming this episode, there have already been 2 hot car deaths in the United States in 2026, a 1-year-old girl in Florida and a 7-month-old boy in Tennessee. Today, we're going to walk through the 3 most common patterns behind these tragedies, the stories of the children affected, and the prevention strategies that safety advocates say can help save lives. And there are important things we all can do even if we don't have children ourselves. Before we continue, if you're new here, my name's Amanda, and this is Their Voice Matters, where we tell true crime stories with clarity, care, and compassion. Today's episode is a little different from what I typically cover, but it's something I'm really passionate about, and I thought it was incredibly important to talk about this, especially with temperatures beginning to rise across the U.S. I don't usually ask this directly, but if you find this episode helpful or informative, please share it. These tragedies are often preventable, and awareness really does save lives. Whether someone is a parent, caregiver, family member, teacher, friend, neighbor, anyone who's around children. And if you'd like to support the channel and help these stories reach more people, please like and subscribe or follow the podcast. It really does make a difference. With that said, let's get into today's episode. Category 1, Forgotten by a Caregiver. Sofia's story. At around 4:45 p.m. on Wednesday, August 23, 2017, in Mason, Ohio, Karen Osorio Martinez checked her daughter's daycare app and noticed that her husband, Enrique Aviero, still hadn't picked up their 15-month-old daughter, Sofia. She called him and offered to go get Sofia herself, but Enrique assured her that he was almost there. When he arrived at the daycare, staff told him something that immediately felt wrong. Sofia had never been checked in that morning. He called Karen right away. She later recalled, quote, "Enrique called me and said, 'Karen, Sofia hasn't been checked in.' And I said, 'Go talk to the teachers because she was checked in.' But the teachers told him they hadn't seen Sofia all day." Karen later said her first thought was, quote, "Someone stole our baby. And if they didn't steal her, then she should still be in the car." Security footage captured the moment Karen processed what Enrique told her. After a brief pause, she sprinted to the parking lot. Her car had been sitting outside for approximately 9.5 hours. The high that day was 76 degrees Fahrenheit or 24 degrees Celsius, but inside the car, it was much hotter. She said, quote, "That's when I saw her. She was in the car." Karen immediately called 911, telling the dispatcher, "My baby just died. My baby just died. I left her in the car. She's dead." Cases like Sofia's account for more than half of child hot car deaths in the United States. To understand how something like this can happen, we need to go back to the days leading up to Sofia's death and the routine changes that investigators and safety advocates say are often present in cases like this. Karen and Enrique were both highly educated professionals in their mid-30s. Karen had a doctorate in development and genetics from Cornell University and worked as a senior scientist at Procter & Gamble in Mason, Ohio. Enrique also worked as a data scientist for P&G, though at a different location. 15-month-old Sofia was their only child. On a typical day, Karen would drop Sofia off at daycare before going to work and having a full day of meetings. At the end of the day, either Enrique or both parents together would pick her up. But on Tuesday, August 22nd, their normal routine changed. That day, Enrique dropped Sofia off at daycare, and Karen went to pick her up later that afternoon. The next day, Wednesday, August 23rd, also started differently. Karen originally had a meeting scheduled for 7:30 a.m., but it was canceled, so she let Sofia sleep in and she started working from home. Around 7 a.m., Karen woke Sofia up, fed her, got her dressed, and put her in her rear-facing car seat right behind the driver's seat for the 5-minute drive to daycare. But despite fully intending to take Sofia to daycare, Karen later realized that she had driven directly to work. After arriving at the office, her day was also far from routine. Her department was moving to a different part of the office, and much of her day was spent packing. Throughout the day, Karen periodically checked the daycare's app to see how Sofia was doing, as she usually did. The app allowed staff to log details like meals, naps, and diaper changes. But Karen later realized that she was looking at the log for Tuesday, the previous day, and not for Wednesday. Sofia's cause of death was ruled hyperthermia, an umbrella term of heat-related illnesses caused by prolonged heat exposure or physical overexertion. Police investigated the circumstances surrounding Sofia's death. Karen's phone, vehicle, and purse were examined to determine whether any medications, substances, or other factors may have impaired her judgment. Investigators found no evidence that Karen had been under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or that she had intentionally left Sofia in the vehicle. Warren County prosecutor David Forshnell ultimately declined to file charges. He stated that phone records showing Karen repeatedly checking the daycare app, along with surveillance footage capturing the moment she realized Sofia was still in the car, supported investigators' conclusion that Sofia's death was a tragic accident. He said, quote, "Ohio law requires that she knew the child was in the vehicle. There was absolutely no evidence that she realized that she left her child in the vehicle." Enrique later said, quote, "Sofia was her first, second, and third priority. It never even ran through my mind that Karen was at fault. She loved that girl so much. There was no question." KJ's story. At 5:30 p.m. on Tuesday, July 22, 2025, a blisteringly hot day in Alabama, a daycare worker realized that one of the children had never returned from a supervised visit earlier that day. 3-year-old Katorius Starks Jr., known to loved ones as KJ, had been transported that morning by a driver named Keila Stanford for a scheduled supervised visit with his father. But hours later, he still hadn't been brought back to daycare. Staff contacted KJ's foster mother, Artie. She later said, quote, "I did try to reach out to the driver, and when I called the driver, she said, 'Oh, let me go see, and I'll call you back.' And she never called me back." Following that call, Keila Stanford went out to her car that had been sitting outside in the summer heat for approximately 5 hours. KJ was still inside. She called 911, but it was too late. Just after 6 p.m., KJ was pronounced dead at the scene. KJ was described by loved ones as a smart, happy child with an infectious laugh that could light up a room. His life had started with challenges. At just 3 months old, he was placed into foster care with Artie and her family. He was their second foster child. Artie later explained that she had begun fostering because she was unable to have more children of her own and wanted her daughter to grow up with siblings. KJ quickly became part of the family. Artie, who KJ called Mom, later described him as, quote, "my joy and my baby." By all accounts, KJ was surrounded by people who loved and cared about him deeply. That Tuesday morning began like any other weekday. Artie dropped KJ off at daycare and planned to pick him up later that afternoon. KJ also had a scheduled supervised visit with his biological father that day. Keila Stanford was an employee of Covenant Services, a private child welfare provider contracted through Alabama's Department of Human Resources, or DHR, to transport children in state care. Her responsibility that morning was to pick KJ up from daycare, take him to the DHR office for his scheduled visit, and then return him to daycare. According to Artie, this transportation arrangement had happened several times before. At around 11:30 a.m., Stanford picked up KJ from his visitation to take him back to daycare. But instead of returning him to daycare, investigators said she went to lunch, ran errands, and then returned home at about 12:30 p.m. KJ was still in the back seat of the vehicle. It wouldn't be until about 5:30 p.m., when daycare staff called to report that KJ had never returned, that Stanford went back outside to her car and saw KJ still inside. Temperatures that day reached approximately 96 degrees Fahrenheit, or 35 degrees Celsius, with a heat index climbing to around 108 degrees Fahrenheit, or 42 degrees Celsius. That same day, Keila Stanford was arrested, though court records later showed she was released after posting bail. She was later indicted by a grand jury on charges related to leaving a child unattended in a motor vehicle, resulting in KJ's death. Unlike Ohio law, Alabama law doesn't require prosecutors to prove that a caregiver knowingly left a child inside a vehicle in order for criminal charges to apply. KJ's father later said, quote, "Words can't even express how I feel right now. As soon as I leave my son, the first thing he says is, 'Daddy, I want to go with you.' He says that every time, and it really hurts." Artie later said, quote, "He was my joy, and she took my joy away. He's my baby, and I miss my baby." Regardless of the legal outcome, cases like Sofia's and KJ's continue to raise important questions about awareness, transportation, safety, memory, and prevention. So, how does someone genuinely believe they dropped a child off when they haven't? And why do so many of these tragedies follow similar patterns? According to safety experts and researchers, there are several factors that repeatedly appear in cases where children are unintentionally forgotten inside vehicles. Our brains are designed to be efficient. Every day, we complete countless tasks, almost automatically. Driving familiar routes, doing the dishes, brushing our teeth, or arriving at work without actively thinking through every step. Most of us have experienced moments where we're doing something we've done hundreds of times, only to realize afterward that we barely remember doing it at all. And sometimes that autopilot system can override our intentions. For example, many people have experienced driving toward work on a day off when they fully intended to go somewhere else. Experts say the brain can also create false memories, convincing us that something we intended to do was already done, when it wasn't. It's similar to believing that you've already told someone something important, only to later realize that you hadn't. Or being certain that you locked the front door before leaving for the day, only to come home later and realize that it was never locked at all. In many cases like this, researchers say it's not necessarily that the caregiver forgot about the child themselves, but that they forgot what they were doing, taking the child somewhere. So the brain essentially checked off that the task had been done, even though that never actually happened. And then the caregiver goes about the rest of their day, believing that the task had already been done. Changes in routine are another pattern that are common in these types of cases. For Karen, the morning schedule was different than usual. She started the day from home, left later than normal. And the day before, she and her husband had switched their usual daycare routines. In KJ's case, it's been reported that Keela Stanford's routine was disrupted after she received a phone call saying she had no more transportation assignments that day. She reportedly said, quote, "I got sidetracked and stopped off and got something to eat. And when I came out, instead of going to the left to the daycare because I got called and said I didn't have a case, I instantly said to myself, oh, I'm done for the day. I'm going to go home." Safety experts say even small changes in routine can sometimes interrupt the brain's normal memory patterns, especially during repetitive daily tasks like commuting. Researchers have also noted that many caregivers involved in these types of cases were dealing with stress, distraction, sleep deprivation, or mental overload. Parents of young children are often exhausted, juggling work schedules, appointments, household responsibilities, and constant interruptions throughout the day. Sleep deprivation and chronic stress can affect our concentration, short-term memory, and attention, making it easier for the brain to rely on autopilot behavior. That doesn't erase responsibility or consequences, but experts say it may help explain why these tragedies can happen to people who otherwise appear loving, attentive, and responsible. There are also cases involving transportation systems and caregiver handoffs. Some children have been unintentionally left behind on daycare vans or transportation vehicles because workers failed to physically check seats after unloading children. In other cases, caregivers believed someone else had the child, assumed another person completed the drop-off, or failed to verbally confirm that a handoff had actually happened. Small communication breakdowns like this can have devastating consequences. Prevention is key, and there are several habits and safety systems that may help reduce the risk of these tragedies. After Sofia's death, Karen founded the Bag in the Back campaign to help educate caregivers about prevention. The campaign encourages caregivers to place something essential in the back seat, something they would absolutely never leave behind every time they drive. That could be a purse, wallet, phone, work badge, briefcase, or even a shoe. And the idea is simple. When the caregiver goes to the back seat to retrieve the item, they would also see the child. Advocates stress that this should become a consistent habit, even on days when the child is not in the vehicle. so the routine itself becomes automatic. Safety advocates also encourage daycares and caregivers to create attendance confirmation systems. In many schools, parents are quickly notified if a child has an unexplained absence. Some experts believe that these systems should be standard in daycares as well. If a child expected at daycare never arrives, an early phone call or text message could alert caregivers before a tragedy happens. When it comes to heat-related emergencies, time is critical. Parents and caregivers can also proactively ask daycares to alert them if their child does not show up when they're expected. Experts also recommend creating clear verbal confirmation systems during child handoffs and transportation. Simple phrases like "you have them" followed by "I have them" may seem minor, but intentional verbal confirmation can help interrupt autopilot thinking and reduce assumptions. Another recommendation involves creating visual reminders inside the car itself. Caregivers can place a stuffed animal or other object in the car seat when the child is not present, and then move it to the front seat when the child is riding in the car. The goal is to create an immediate visual cue that the child is inside the vehicle. But not all hot car deaths are because a caregiver forgot a child in the back seat. In some cases, children are intentionally left inside vehicles, often because the adult believes they will only be gone for a few minutes, or assumes the vehicle itself is safe. And sometimes those assumptions can become deadly. Category 2, knowingly left behind. Amillio's story. On June 29, 2025, Maya Hernandez drove with her two sons, 1-year-old Amillio and his 2-year-old brother, from their home in Visalia to Bakersfield, California, a drive of about an hour and 15 minutes. According to reports, she was headed to a med spa for lip injections, a common cosmetic procedure that typically only takes about 15 to 20 minutes. Before the appointment, Hernandez reportedly messaged the med spa, asking whether the children could come inside with her. The response she received was, quote, "Sure, if you don't mind them waiting in the waiting room, hun." But when they arrived, Hernandez chose to leave the boys alone in the vehicle instead. Investigators said she left them with snacks, cartoons playing on her phone for entertainment, and the vehicle's air conditioning running while she went inside. Approximately 2 hours later, she returned to the vehicle. By then, the air conditioning had shut off. Temperatures that day reached approximately 102 degrees Fahrenheit, or 39 degrees Celsius. Amillio's older brother survived, but reports said he was overheated and lethargic. But 1-year-old Amillio was unresponsive. He was later pronounced dead at the hospital. Reports later said that his internal body temperature had reached 107 degrees Fahrenheit, or 42 degrees Celsius. Investigators later determined that while the vehicle's air conditioning system had initially been running, the manufacturer designed the system to automatically shut off after about an hour. That meant that the children had been trapped inside the hot vehicle without air conditioning for at least an hour. A similar situation happened in Arizona in 2024, in the case of 2-year-old Parker Scholtes. She was also left in a vehicle with the air conditioning running before it turned off, and she was left in a hot car for hours. I covered Parker's case and the legal proceedings surrounding it in a separate episode. I'll leave it linked in the description. At the time of Amillio's death, the boy's father was incarcerated. Amillio's older brother was placed into protective custody. According to reports, Maya Hernandez admitted that she knew that leaving the boys alone in the car was irresponsible, but she still chose to do it and was unable to justify her reasoning. She was initially charged with second-degree murder and 2 counts of child endangerment. The first trial ended in a mistrial after jurors were unable to reach a unanimous decision on the murder charge, though she was found guilty on the counts of child endangerment. Hernandez later pleaded no contest to involuntary manslaughter and was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Amillio's father, Amillio Gutierrez, later said, quote, "I just don't think 15 years is enough. This should have never happened. It just kills me." When it comes to cases like Amillio's and Parker's, safety experts say the prevention message is straightforward. Children should never be left unsupervised inside a vehicle, even for a few minutes, even if the air conditioning is running. A common thread in many cases like this is a false sense of security, the belief that the child would be safe inside the vehicle for a short period of time. But in reality, vehicles should never be relied upon for child care, even for a little while. Many people underestimate how quickly a situation can become dangerous. Cars can shut off automatically. Mechanical systems can fail. Children left alone may be unable to signal that something is wrong. And there's also the risk of carjacking with the child alone inside. Even on relatively mild days, the temperature inside a parked vehicle can increase by approximately 20 degrees Fahrenheit within just 10 minutes, over 30 degrees within 30 minutes, and over 40 degrees in an hour. Children are also far more vulnerable to heat-related illnesses than adults. According to noheatstroke.org, quote, children's thermoregulatory systems are not as efficient as adults, and their body temperatures warm at a rate 3 to 5 times faster than an adult's. Young children are especially vulnerable because they're often strapped into car seats, and they're unlikely to be able to communicate distress or escape the vehicle on their own. And if you ever see a child left alone in a hot vehicle, experts say to get them out immediately, call 911, and cool them off as quickly as possible. At first glance, cases like this may seem easier to prevent. Just don't leave a child alone inside a vehicle. And yet, according to national data, knowingly leaving children inside vehicles still accounts for nearly 22% of child hot car deaths in the US. But there's another category that accounts for even more deaths, one that many people don't realize can happen at all. The parents of 6-year-old Sydney Stanley didn't either. Category 3, child gained access independently. Sydney's story. 6-year-old Sydney Stanley lived in Alpharetta, Georgia with her parents, Jenny and Mike, and her 2 older brothers, who were 10 and 12 years old at the time. Jenny later described Sydney as, quote, full of happiness, a princess some days and a tomboy the other days. She also remembered that, quote, when she would get upset, she would say, someone hurt my feeling, not her feelings, her feeling. On the morning of Sunday, August 22nd, 2010, the Stanley family attended church together, and Sydney attended Sunday school, where she had been working on a craft. By the time the family was getting ready to leave, Sydney had not finished her craft, so she asked Jenny if she could bring it home to finish it later. Of course, Jenny agreed. After returning home from church, the family had lunch together. It was a hot summer day, with temperatures reaching approximately 94 degrees Fahrenheit, or 34 degrees Celsius. Sydney asked if she could go next door to play with her best friend, something Jenny said happened all the time. The girls regularly went back and forth between each other's houses. Sydney left for her neighbor's house, while Jenny and her oldest son went to run errands. Mike and the couple's 10-year-old son stayed home. After leaving the first store, Jenny called Mike and asked him to have their son go next door to bring Sydney home. Jenny later explained that she didn't want the neighbors to have the responsibility of both girls all afternoon, but Sydney's friend was welcome to come over to their house to play. But when Sydney's brother knocked on the neighbor's door, he got an unexpected answer. Sydney wasn't there. He went home and told Mike, who immediately called Jenny. At first, they assumed maybe Sydney had wandered off to another friend's house. So Mike began calling around the neighborhood, but no one had seen her. Jenny asked Mike to begin searching for Sydney by car, and she began driving home. But when Mike got into the car to begin searching, he found Sydney inside. She was laying in the fetal position on the floorboard of the back seat. Jenny was still driving home when she got a call from a family friend. Their son had contacted them for help. She spoke to her son. He was hysterical and said, quote, "We found Sydney and she is very blue." Emergency responders were already on the way, and Jenny rushed home. When she arrived, paramedics were attempting life-saving measures and preparing to take Sydney to the hospital. Mike was sitting nearby in shock, saying, quote, "It's too late. It's just too late." Jenny begged paramedics to not stop working on her daughter. But before leaving for the hospital, the head EMT approached the family and said that they were so sorry, but they had done all they could. Sydney did not survive. Jenny later said that she believes she knows what likely happened that afternoon. She believes Sydney went to the neighbor's house, but they weren't home, and that Sydney may have gone into Mike's vehicle looking for the Sunday school craft that she had wanted to finish after church. What Sydney didn't realize is that Jenny had already brought the craft inside the house after they got home. Unable to find it, Sydney may have continued searching inside the vehicle before she was overcome by the heat and unable to get out. As heartbreaking as Sydney's story is, these types of tragedies are more common than people realize. And in many cases, the children involved are much younger. Kameron's story. On the afternoon of Sunday, June 22nd, 2025, 4-year-old Kameron Jamel Williams was reported missing from his apartment complex in Metter, Georgia. When authorities arrived, they began searching the area alongside family members looking for Kameron. A family member eventually found him inside a vehicle at the complex. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Temperatures that day reached approximately 93 degrees Fahrenheit or 34 degrees Celsius. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation, or GBI, took over the case. According to investigators, Kameron apparently left the apartment on his own and began playing outside before entering the vehicle. Authorities also stated there was surveillance footage showing someone, believed to be Kameron, getting inside the vehicle and never coming back out. After Sydney's death, her mother Jenny said, quote, "The more I talked, the more I realized that this was rare, a child getting into a car. Other parents have said, it never crossed my mind that this could happen. I didn't think about it either, before it happened to us." But despite how uncommon these tragedies may seem, child safety advocates say this happens much more often than people realize. Children gaining access to vehicles on their own is actually the second leading category of child hot car deaths in the United States, accounting for 248 deaths between 1998 and 2025. So how do we help prevent tragedies like Sydney's and Kameron's? One of the most important steps is also one of the simplest. Always lock your vehicle, even if you don't have children yourself. Many people assume that if a child can get into a vehicle, they can simply get back out. But that's not necessarily true, especially for young children who may panic, become disoriented, or be overwhelmed by the heat quickly. After Kameron's death, Amber Rollins, director of the nonprofit organization Kids and Car Safety, explained, quote, "The act of opening a vehicle door from the inside is a cognitively difficult task for a 4-year-old. You have to pull the handle and push the door at the same time. It's recommended to always keep vehicles locked, keep keys and fobs out of the reach of children, and encourage everyone around you to do the same." Experts also encourage caretakers to teach children that cars can become dangerous very quickly. Amber Rollins suggested explaining it to children in simple terms, comparing a hot car to something like an oven or stove. Phrases like, "It's very hot and we don't touch it," or "The inside of a car is never safe without a grown-up," may help young children better understand the danger. It's also recommended to teach children how to unlock and open a car door from the inside, how to honk the horn continuously if trapped, and to stay visible near the windows so someone can see them. And if a child ever goes missing, immediately check every nearby vehicle, including locked cars, floorboards, and trunks. And importantly, child hot car deaths are not just a summer issue. In 2018 and 2019, the deadliest years on record, each with 53 deaths per year, the first death happened in February and the last in November, respectively. Awareness and prevention need to happen year-round. These kinds of tragedies happen across all kinds of families and circumstances, and not just in the US, but globally as well. There have been reports of children dying or being rescued from hot cars in countries including Brazil, Italy, India, Canada, Australia, Israel, France, Belgium, and the UK, though that is likely far from a complete list. No matter where someone lives, awareness and prevention matter. Understanding the patterns behind these incidents and knowing how quickly they can happen may be what helps prevent the next tragedy. And this is something all of us can help with, whether we have children or not, because these deaths are overwhelmingly preventable, which is what makes them so heartbreaking. Alongside personal prevention habits, safety advocates have also pushed for broader technological safeguards. In 2021, advocacy group Kids and Car Safety helped secure a federal regulation requiring new vehicles to eventually include child detection reminder systems. These systems may use motion sensors, radar, weight detection, or other technology to alert drivers if a child may still be inside the vehicle. Many newer vehicles already include versions of this technology. But experts stress that this technology is not enough. Older vehicles won't have these systems. Technology can fail, and no alert system can replace supervision and prevention habits. Before researching this episode, I didn't realize how many of these tragedies follow the same patterns. I'm curious, was there anything you learned or a prevention tip that stood out to you, or something you think others need to know about? Let me know in the comments. And if you'd like to check out another episode after this one, I'll leave one on screen. And you can also find all episodes on the channel or podcast. Thank you for being here, and thank you for caring. Because sharing these stories and helping prevent the next tragedy really does matter. I'll see you in the next episode.